welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going over the coolest crossbody bag. Today, we're making the Tremont Crossbody bag, and this comes to us from Hold It Right There Patterns. So this is the first time we've actually done a tutorial for Hold It Right There Patterns, and it will not be the last. Holy guacamole. This bag is adorable. Now, this is an adorable, slim, smaller crossbody, but it's also like a wallet. So when you're building this bag, kind of have that in the back of your mind. So let's just go through the bag real quick. First of all, I want to mention I am using pre-made straps today. I am not making the straps. These are all just pre-made straps. You can order them on our website. You can find them all over the place. But on the front of this bag right here, you can see you have this really cute little dome shape. We have this fun little vinyl accent on the bottom, which is always nice. I always appreciate a vinyl bottom to a bag. It just makes it easier to clean. We have this really cute little front zip pocket. This little zip pocket is where if you have a really fun zipper pull, you're gonna wanna use it there. And so then just a small pocket there. And when we flip it around, we have the tabs on the back as well as a magnetic slip pocket. If you've been around for a while, you know that I love a back of the bag slip pocket. This is where my cell phone goes and it stays right against my body. Okay, now we have two zip pulls so that we can open this nice and wide. Now this is where it gets kind of cool. So you open it up, you can see the zippers go all the way to the bottom, and then on the sides, we have like a little wallet gusset. Isn't that cute? It's a little folded gusset on the side so it doesn't whoop open all the way and everything falls out. So you have little gussets like that. And then on the inside, we have a zip pocket in the lining. And then on the front, we've got some card slots. I know some of you guys love your card slots in your purses and in your pouches and things like that. So this is a fantastic little travel bag. If you don't want to carry the big wallet with the library cards and all the other cards you don't need, you just need the bare essentials. You're going to a theme park, you're going to the zoo, you're going to the pool, something like that where you just need your money, your ID, basics. This is a great, great little travel bag. I love it. So let me grab a step stool and I'll show you this bag on for size. Okay, I am 5 feet 4 inches and a size small. Now this strap that I'm using right here, this is not an adjustable strap. So I'll show you today's tutorial. We are going to be using an adjustable strap. So if you made an adjustable strap, you can make it a little bit higher. This is probably the height that I would like it. But you can see it's just a nice, it's just a nice, like everyday basic bag. It's not huge because it doesn't need to be. So thank you so much to Hold It Right There Patterns for allowing me to film this tutorial. This bag is so stinking adorable. They have a lot of other patterns as well. I would say this is more of like an intermediate bag pattern. There's not really a lot of stuff, like there's not a whole lot of pieces and stuff, but it is a similar construction to like a wallet, so it is going to take you a few steps. I'm going to walk you through every single piece of this today. As you can see on my bag, I am using a quilt weight cotton for the exterior, the vinyl for the bottom, and then a waterproof canvas for the lining. I really like that combination because the waterproof canvas adds a little bit of bulk, but from the lining side, so you can get away with using some really lightweight material on the exterior of the bag and still have fantastic structure. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. If you guys go check out the website, which I highly recommend you do, but once you go check out the other patterns, if there's another pattern you'd like to see on the channel from Hold It Right There Patterns, please leave it down in the comments below. I'm really excited. You guys know how I am. I get on a kick, I buy all the patterns, and then I just want to make all of them right now. All right, guys, let's get started. So for this pattern, you're going to need 3 different fabrics, fabric 1, fabric 2, and fabric 3. Fabric 1 is the exteriors. This is what you're going to see the most of. I'm going to use cool cotton today. There are a lot of folds and pieces to this pattern. It is kind of like a wallet bag, so I opted for a thinner weight material. If you have a stronger machine though, you can definitely go ahead and use a vinyl or a cork for this. For the lining, I am going to be using waterproof canvas. Now this is fabric 2, and I'm going to be using the waterproof canvas for the card slots as well. So my suggestion for that is just make sure you have a lighter weight waterproof canvas. For example, OtterTex is a very thick and stiff waterproof canvas. However, this waterproof canvas comes to us from Wonderground Fabrics. It's a little bit lighter, a little bit easier, and I found that it will work for card slot pockets. The nice thing about waterproof canvas for the lining is that I don't have to add any interfacing to it, and when we have so many pieces like we do today, it just saves some time. So from fabric 1, you're going to need at least 3/4 of a yard. From fabric 2, you're going to need at least 1 yard. And then finally, we have fabric 3. This is just like a vinyl cork, a little bit stiffer accent that goes on the bottom of the bag. I'm also going to be using it for the D-ring tabs, and you can use it for the crossbody strap as well. However, I'm not going to be using this for the crossbody strap. If you're using waterproof canvas, I actually do suggest you use waterproof canvas, maybe a combination of the waterproof canvas and the quill cotton, or waterproof canvas and the vinyl for your crossbody strap. Waterproof canvas is a great option, especially for beginners when making crossbody straps. I have a whole video going over that, and I will link it in the top of the screen. So now let's talk interfacing. I'm going to be using woven interfacing, Decovil Light, and then a firmer interfacing. Today I have some scraps of Peltex, so that's what I'll be using. From your woven interfacing, this is SoFuse, and this is going to be used on anything that is quilt weight cotton. So if you're using it for the lining and the exterior, you need to fuse pretty much everything with your interfacing. So you're going to need at least 2 2/3 a yard of your woven interfacing. I'm actually going to be using less than that since I'm using waterproof canvas for the lining, and I don't have to add this to waterproof canvas. Next, I have my Decovil Light. You're going to need at least 2/3 a yard of that. You could also use SoFuse Plus here if you'd like. And then for the base, this is really just a small cut for the very base of the bag. You just need a small scrap of your Decovil Heavy or Peltex. So here is all the other stuff. Lots of stuff today. First, I'm using a pre-made crossbody strap. Instead of making a strap, I love using these pre-made straps. They just make it all so much easier. So I have one of those. Next, I have 2 zipper pulls that are going to go on the top part of the bag, so opening the main compartment of the bag. And then I have a feature zipper pull that's going to go on the exterior front of the bag, and then another kind of more basic zipper pull for the lining of the bag. Lots of zipper tape today. You're going to need at least 1 1/3 yard of zipper tape. To help me with marking and turning and all that other stuff, I have my turning tool, I have my stiletto, a chalk marker for dark fabric, an air erasing marker for light fabric, a vinyl marker for vinyl. Next, I have my magnetic snap closure. So I prefer to use the magnetic snap closure that has a rivet on the back. These come from Cam Snaps. You have a special die for it. If you have a rivet press, I highly suggest you get this. You don't have to worry about the prongs on the back of magnetic snaps rubbing against the material and having to cover it up. These rivets are nice and smooth. They're not going to destroy your work. I'm also going to be using a couple of these little like mouse-shaped rivets. I haven't tried these before. This is the first time, so we'll see if they work. I also have regular rivets on backup just in case, but I did notice that they have a very special bottom die to use, and then the top die, these are actually really tiny, and I don't think I have one this small, so I'm going to try it with an 8mm top die today. My bag tag for the front of the bag. The pattern calls for 2 1/2-inch D-rings, but I'm actually going to be using 1-inch D-rings because I'm using a vinyl strap tab and I need it to be a little bit bigger for that. I always have a lighter on hand. I'll show you how we use it. Next, we have our thread. In the bobbin, I have just some good old Gutermann thread. In the top, I have a Tex 35 weight thread. You could also use a Mara 70 weight. A little bit thicker of a thread is always really nice in your top stitching. My needle today is a Microtex 8012. That should be fine. If you're using a lot of vinyl and cork and heavy duty stuff, you might want to up it to a 9014 needle. My scissors of choice are always my Kais and my little snips. So let's just go through the pattern pieces one at a time. First we have A, which is your exterior panel and your lining panel. So this is the front of your bag. This is my quilt cotton exterior, and it already has the woven interfacing on the back. You're gonna have another cut of your lining. Again, if you have quilt cotton anywhere, interface it with woven interfacing. Since I have the waterproof canvas, there's no interfacing on the back. And then you're gonna have a cut of Decovil Light, and you're gonna notice that my cut of Decovil Light is smaller. We have a lot of stuff going on in the seams today. Like I said, this is almost like a wallet, but a bag. We want to keep as much stuff out of the seams as possible. I prefer to have my woven interfacing go into the seams, but that does add some bulk. But definitely cut down on the firmer interfacing like the Decovil Light. So you can see on the pattern pieces, there are dashed lines, and that's your cut size for the Decovil Light. All the pattern pieces have written on it what fabric you need, where you need to cut it. Next, we have pattern pieces B1 and B2. Now, B1 is the exterior back panel top. So this is your exterior material with your interfacing, and then a smaller cut of your Decoville light. And then B2 is the lining that goes beneath this. Now, I know this came a little confusing because I was like, but this is the back. Why would I use the lining? This is actually going to be covered up with a pocket, and that pocket will have the exterior material. So this is just like the back of a lining pocket. So next we have C1 and C2, and C1 is that pocket I was just telling you about. This is your exterior material, and then you're going to have a smaller cut of your Decoville light or your SoFuse Plus to go with that. And then C2 is the exterior slip pocket lining. Next, we have pattern pieces D and E. D, you're going to have 2 cuts for your exterior zip pocket. This is for that zipper pocket on the front. And then strap E, you're going to have 2 cuts of these. I'm going to be using vinyl for this, but if you're using any sort of quilt cotton, just make sure you add some woven interfacing to it. So for pattern piece F, you have an option here. You can use this one or this one. I'm going to be using this overlay option 1 because this option pretty much stays out of the seams and it helps reduce bulk. If you have a more heavy duty machine, you can use option 2 here, and I'll just show you. These are both vinyl cuts. So as you can see, option 1 is just a little bit smaller than option 2 because we're just going to pretty much top stitch this over the material and it's not really going to be in the seams. This one here will be in all the seams, and there will be zippers around some of the seams. So just think about that. If you don't want to worry about layers of lining and exterior and then your vinyl and a zipper, I would go with option 1. All right, so the G pattern piece is for the accordion that goes on the sides of the bag. And this is where it's kind of like a small like zip wallet. You know, there's a little accordion on the side. So cute. So from there, you're gonna need 4 cuts total of your lining, but you can see they are mirrored. So you're gonna cut 2 like this, flip over the pattern piece, cut 2 like that. You're gonna do the same thing with your exterior material. The pattern does suggest you keep any interfacing out of the seams because this does get very bulky. Obviously no interfacing on my waterproof canvas, but I did include the interfacing in the seams on the exterior, and I will tell you that does make it a little bulky because this is right next to a zipper, so it can kind of get hung up on it. So that's going to be your choice whether you keep the interfacing in or out of the seams on this material. All right, next up we have pattern pieces H1, H2, and H3, and I'm just going to kind of lay them out. So H1 is just a rectangle. This goes in the center. H2 is this, curved, and you're going to cut 1 like this and 1 mirrored, so it goes around like that, see? And then H3 is your bottom. So this is how it all goes together. And here you'll have your card slot pockets. So here we have pattern pieces I, J, and K. I is a lining slip pocket. The pattern does call for you to use the exterior material for this, which is a really cute pop of, bringing the outside of the bag inside. You can jazz this up however you like. You can make it super scrappy if you'd like, but we are using the exterior for this little slip pocket that goes in the lining. Pattern piece J is this nice long piece. This is going to be folded up and used for the card slot pockets. If you're using quilt cotton, there are instructions on here to make smaller rectangular cuts of your woven interfacing so that you can overlap it and accordion it. I'm not using quilt cotton, so I'm just going to use the waterproof canvas for that. And then pattern piece K is your interior zip pocket, and we're using, again, the exterior fabric. If you have vinyl for your exterior fabric, don't use that here. Just use whatever you'd like, but these are just like nice little pops inside of the bag, so it's not just, that red lining. And then don't forget your ultra firm stabilizer cuts. This is the base of the bag. This gives the bottom of the bag really nice structure so you don't have a saggy bottom. We don't need a saggy bottom bag. And then you're gonna have 2 little 1" by 1" cuts of your firm interfacing as well. This is going to go with the magnetic snaps to prevent anything from ripping your material. All right, so depending on if you're using Woven Fuse Plus or Decoville Light, that's going to kind of determine how you fuse the interfacing for A, B, and C. I'm using Decoville Light, which means I'm just pretty much centering it on all 3 of these panels because I don't want it in any of the seam. If you're using the SoFuse Plus, then you're actually on a couple of these, you're just going to be taking it out of this connector seam right here, but you can let it go in the rest of the seam. Because SoFuse Plus is a little bit easier and thinner than Decoville Light. So we're going to take the exterior panel A and lay it right side down, wrong side up. And then we're going to take our Decoville Light and center it on the back. And now I'm going to grab a scrap piece of fabric to just kind of cover the back of this while I quickly fuse it somewhat to the back, because I want to fuse it mostly from the front, but I just don't want it moving around on me. So I'm just giving it a quick fuse on the back, and then I'll flip it over. And now I can give it a nice steamy fuse from the front of the material, and that's going to get to that glue really well. All right, so you can see this is nice and fused on the center of the back. Now I'm gonna do the same thing for pattern piece B and C. All right, so now we're gonna work on that front zipper pocket. So grab your pattern pieces D, your lining panel, and then your exterior panel piece A, and let's flip it to the back and mark a rectangle. A helpful thing to do on pretty much all your pattern pieces is to mark the midpoints. Now this is something that's probably a good idea to do right before you get started so you don't have to worry about it, but I always forget. So I'm gonna mark the midpoint on the top curved edge and also on the bottom edge. I'm not sure the bottom edge is necessary, but why not? There we go. And then same thing for these panels. I'm going to mark the midpoint on the top edge of my zipper lining panels. All right, so I marked a 1/2 inch by 6 inch wide rectangle on the back of my front exterior. And now I'm going to flip over that exterior so I'm looking at the right side, and I'm going to grab one of my lining pockets and I'm going to lay that right side down, and I'm going to measure down 1 3/4 of an inch from the top edge, and I'm going to line up the midpoint mark on my lining pocket with the midpoint mark on the top edge. Okay, so you could use needles here to hold this in place, but with waterproof canvas, I don't really want to poke it with a hole. So I'm just going to use this Kimberbell tape. This stuff is great because you can sew over it and it doesn't leave any sticky residue on anything, your needle included. So now we're going to turn our material so that the exterior is wrong side up, and we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew right along the 4 edges of this rectangle. Okay, now make sure you have a midpoint mark going along the long side of the rectangle, and then draw some little triangles. Just reach into it. So it can be a 1/2 inch in. I just make sure the rectangles are going down towards the center and they're not too close to the edge over here. And then what you do is just make sure you've sewn through your lining, and you can remove your tape if you need to. I'm actually just gonna set this to the side in case I need it again. And then using that midpoint mark, I'm going to seam rip right along the center, just enough so that I can grab my scissors and use my scissors to cut along that middle line until I get to the tip of the triangle. Once I get to that, I'm going to follow the diagonals down to the corner of my stitching. So I'm not cutting the stitching, but I am getting so close to it, it's like I'm kissing it. Right to the corner. So do this for both sides of your rectangle. And also, I will say, if you really don't like making these kinds of pockets, you don't have to do this. This is the exterior. This is not used for anything in the end. So if you want to skip this pocket, you're more than welcome to do that. Okay, now, so from the right side of the fabric, we're going to take that pocket and we're going to push it through that hole we just made. This is where it gets a little tricky. Since I've been working with waterproof canvas more, I'm learning that as long as you have that plasticky coated side on the back side of the waterproof canvas, when we press it to itself, it does create a pretty nice seam. So I'll show you. So I'm using this top edge right here. I'm pulling it up and I'm rolling it back and just finger pressing it down, just like this. Okay. And I like to look at it from the front too. I always end up having a little bit of that lining kind of peeking through, but if you want to avoid it, just look from the front and roll the lining back so you don't see it. And that should mean you see a little bit of the exterior on the back side. It just takes practice. If you want to avoid the problem completely, for this lining pocket, just use the same material as your exterior fabric, and then you won't even notice if some of the lining is peeking through. Okay, so grabbing my pressing mat, I'm gonna see if I can do this on this top piece here. I'm just focused on this top edge. I know the rest of it's kind of a mess. Let's see if I can just press down on that top edge to get it to hold in place. So it pressed it decently. It could be better. I'm gonna grab some tape and just tape along the raw edge to help really hold this down. There we go. So now I'm gonna roll the bottom edge just like I did the top. Roll it down. Try not to let this, 1/2 inch rectangle get too big. You can kind of end up stretching it too much. Don't do that. Do your best to keep it 1/2 inch. Pull out those corners. There we go. Get it as flat as you can. Give it a good press again from the back. Okay, now what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna flip it over And I'm gonna press it from the front as well. So even now I still have a little bit of that red peeking through. Personally, it just doesn't bother me. I think actually it almost kind of looks like a little piping or something. I mean, if you want to use your imagination. But I'm gonna press it from the front as well to just get it as flat as I possibly can. There we go. And then let that cool. And if you put like a ruler on top of it or something, it'll cool and stay nice and flat. And just to make sure nothing moves around on me, I'm gonna use just a little bit more tape on this back panel. There we go. All right, so now grab your zipper tape, and I always like to make sure my zipper tape is just a couple inches longer than my window. You can measure it, or you can just kind of eyeball it, and then I will trim it down as I need to. Now I'm gonna add my pull to my zipper tape. I just realized my zipper tape is like an antique bronze, and my zipper pull is a gunmetal, but we're gonna go with it. Sometimes I like to mix up my metals. Let's see how this works out. Something I forgot to share with you in the beginning is double-sided tape. Double-sided tape is always helpful when it comes to installing zippers like this. So we're just gonna add the double-sided tape right along the edge of your zipper tape. You could also instead add it right along this edge on the long edges of your lining panel here if you'd like. Whichever one is easier for you. Okay, so before we stick anything, let's just kind of give it a look. So this is how it's going to look. I like my zipper to close towards the left, so you can see when the zipper's closed, it'll be towards the left. Think about that now. And then I like to do this one at a time. So I'm gonna remove the paper from the top tape first. And then I'm just going to center this. So make sure it's not like all the way to one side. You don't want to accidentally get your zipper too short on one side. Just make sure it's centered. And then do your best to make sure the zipper teeth are centered. Let's pull up that zipper pull, go all the way to the left, and get it all lined up the way we want it. Once you're happy with it, just fold up the bottom, take the paper off the bottom tape, and then fold the whole thing back down, gently pressing, making sure it's all centered. You can unzip, rezip. There we go. So that's our zipper. How cute is that? Now let's go to the sewing machine and top stitch around this rectangle from the front side at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that's gonna hold the zipper in place. Okay, so as you can tell, I did not backstitch. I just left the tails really long. So the top threads, the 2 top threads from the beginning and the end, and the bobbin threads, I left those long. And what I do is I just pull on the bobbin threads, and I pull that top thread to the back. So then all 4 of my threads are now on the back with my zipper tape. And now I just use those 4 threads to create like a triple knot. And then I'm gonna trim these tails down. And since this is still noticeable in the end, I mean, if you look inside the pocket, you can see this. I will go ahead and just burn down those tails. So very gently, I pull my material back so that I have access to those little itty bitty stubs from the tails. And then I gently just melt them and burn them down. And that just helps hold it all in place as well. So now let's remove all of our tape. And I mean, if you want, you can also, like for me, I have some of this double-sided tape peeking through. I can just pull that out on the top and the bottom since it did not get sewn in. So now let's grab our remaining lining pocket and lay it right side down on the back of the zipper and just line it up with the 4 edges of your other lining pocket piece. If you want to trim down your zipper tape, you definitely can. Don't trim it too close to where the zipper is in the center here. It doesn't need to be in the seam that we're going to make right now. But you also don't want it too close to your stitching because when you're using your zipper over and over again, it could eventually rip the thread. And that would be so sad. So now with our zipper pocket lining panels right sides together, also forgot to talk about the clips. I use these little clover clips, and let's clip these right sides together. And I'm clipping around all 4 edges. So you might notice one of your lining panels is a little bit longer than the other. That's just because when we folded it through here, we lost a little bit of length there. So that's okay. I'm gonna just push it down like that. So you can see if I flip this up, one lining panel, the newly added lining panel is a little bit longer than the original. That's okay. So now using 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, we're gonna sew along all 4 edges, but we're not sewing through the exterior. So when you do this, it's easiest if you take your material and you lay it like this at the sewing machine, and then pull the exterior out of the way and go along all 4 edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So once you have all 4 sides sewn, you can trim down the seam allowance so that it's closer to the stitches. You don't have to get super close to them, but closer. So here we go. Isn't that cute? A little zip pocket. So now grab your exterior slip pocket C1, and you're gonna lay it right sides together with your exterior front. And we're mainly focused on this bottom edge here, lining that up together. And then clip along the bottom edge. Now let's sew along this bottom edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn, let's pull the panels apart and press the seam allowance open. Now that can be a little tricky. You might find it easiest if you do it from the front and just push one panel up first, so the seam allowance is just behind one panel. And then while that's nice and warm, flip it over and then finger press that seam allowance open, and then give it a press from the back. And just to prevent accidentally sewing through this, which I did do the first time, let's fold this zipper pocket up to the top and clip it to the top of that exterior panel. There we go. Now we're gonna grab the overlay option, and I'm using option 1 here. So then on these longer edges, which are the left and right sides, we're gonna mark the midpoint. So to do that, I am going to use a vinyl marking tool and just draw right on the edge there. So do this for both the left and the right sides. So take your exterior panel and lay it right side up just like this. And we're focused on this seam between the front and the back. And then take your overlay, and with the midpoints on the left and right, you're going to lay it right over this and line up those midpoint marks with the seam that's connecting the front and the back. There we go. And you might notice your overlay is a little bit wider than the panels. That's okay too. Just do your best to get it lined up just by lifting it up and looking. There we go. Now once again, I'm going to grab some tape to help hold this in place. And I will remove the tape as I need to when I'm top stitching. And just make sure it is as flat as you can get it. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine. We're going to top stitch along the entire edge of the overlay at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. That might mean you don't quite catch some stuff on the bottom here. That's okay. Don't worry too much about this. That will be eaten up later. But we're going to go around all the edges at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. You may have noticed I did have to switch out my presser foot because I did notice it was starting to stick to my vinyl and my vinyl was shifting. That's a possibility. If that happens and you don't have a non-stick presser foot, what you can also do is just put a little piece of tape underneath the bottom of your presser foot, and that will help. But since I had to switch it out, I had to cut my material right where I did not want to cut it. But thankfully, I can have these long tails on the front, and then I can pull them from the back just like that. So sometimes when that happens, when our thread runs out or something breaks or something goes wrong and we have, you know, threads hanging where we don't want them, we kind of backstitch and then we have a little bit of a mess. But you don't have to do that. You can just leave the tails long. And now right here, you can't even really see what happened where. And then on the back here, I'll just triple knot this and I don't have to worry about it looking nice or anything because this is not going to be seen in the end. And then over here on the edge, I'm just going to trim the thread because that will be part of a seam allowance a little bit later. All right, now flip this so that's wrong side up. Make sure you have your ironing mat or you're at your ironing board. And then grab that firm interfacing. And what we're going to do is we're just going to center it along the bottom. So it shouldn't reach all the way to the edges. It should be the same width as your deck of the light. Just center it. If you really want to make sure it's perfectly centered, you can fold it in half, mark the midpoint on the short edges, and then align it up here again so that it's centered. And then I've got my scrap material that I'm going to cover the back of it with. My iron doesn't particularly like touching the back of non-woven interfacing, so we're just gonna cover it up. And then with lots of heat and steam, we're gonna fuse this in place. If you find that your whatever material you're using isn't sticking as well as you want, grab yourself some Beacon 3-in-1 glue and glue it in place. I might still end up doing that, even though I am fusing it. Okay, that seems like a somewhat decent fuse. If you wanted to add little purse feet to this, you definitely could. It's a pretty small base. You can see now when you fold it, you get an idea of what your base is. But if you wanted to add a couple little purse feet here, like small ones, you definitely could. I'm not going to, but it would be cute. And that would also hold the Peltex in place. So let's go ahead and set this to the side. Okay, so we have our strap tabs, and on the back, I marked a midpoint line with chalk. Now remember, I'm using vinyl, so I'm gonna be doing mine a little bit different. And I know I keep pulling stuff out that I forgot to show in the beginning. I'm sorry. This is super, super sticky double-sided tape. You really don't wanna sew over this. I'm going to add it right along the center of my tabs, and I'm not letting it go all the way to the edge. I might still end up sewing over it a little bit, but that's okay. I can sew over it a little bit with my needles, and it's okay. I just don't want to sew over it a lot. Which also, remember, I'm making mine 1-inch wide tabs instead of 1/2 inch wide tabs. If you're using quill cotton, you don't need to use tape at all. You can just use your iron. But I'm going to remove the paper, and I'm going to fold the long raw edges, wrong sides together up to meet that midpoint mark. I'm going to do this for both sides. They're just gonna meet one another just like that. Okay, and then what the pattern wants you to do is it wants you to fold it again in half so that you have a little 1/2-inch tab. But because my material is so thick and I'm using the 1-inch D-rings, I'm gonna leave it just like this. I find that this is fine. I'm going to rivet this in place as well in the bag, so you're really not gonna see the back of this at all. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along the folded edges on both of these tabs at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, now grab your hardware, and you're just going to loop your strap around the hardware, and then you can add a clip on the end of it to hold it in place. Just make sure if you have like a raw edge back like I do that it's going, you know, wrong sides together so you don't see them in the end. Now grab a ruler and measure 1/2 inch down from the raw edges and mark a line with some sort of removable marker. So air erasing, water erasing, vinyl, chalk, something like that. And make yourself a little 1/2-inch mark. So do this for both of your strap tabs. And now grab your exterior panel back bottom, which is B2, which this is your lining. And we're gonna measure in 1 inch from the top edge on each side and make a mark. Now you can grab your strap tabs and you're going to lay these down so that they're inside the 1-inch mark, and the 1/2-inch mark line on the tab lines up with the top raw edge. We're just gonna line it all up like that. This way we have some overhang from our strap, which is going to help secure it in the end. So just for both sides, they're going inside those 1-inch marks. They're not going outside of them. We're keeping them 1 inch away from the raw edges on the side. So now let's take these to the sewing machine and just sew these down at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now grab your B1 panel. Oh, doesn't this look so cool? Oh, she looks fantastic, doesn't she? I just love these characters. And we're going to lay it right side down along the top edge of your lining. So it should look just like this. I know it's coming together. Lay it down, and we're gonna line it up with the top edge of the lining. So these overhangs from our tabs, leave those alone. So let's clip the corners first, and then we'll clip the center. There we go, and then you can just kind of straighten it out. If you have midpoints marked, you can line up your midpoints first. It's always a good idea. So now we're gonna sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now take your panel and flip it right side up so that the strap tabs and the seam go down below that lining panel, just like that. Perfect. So now you can iron this or finger press this, get it nice and straight and flat, and we're gonna top stitch right along the lining edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, so before we add some rivets, let's just test it out first. So I'm gonna grab one of these adorable rivets, and I've got a piece of vinyl here. I'm just gonna triple fold it. That should be fine. And I'm gonna use my rivet press that has the hole punch on it to punch a hole through all those layers. sure it goes all the way through. And then I'm going to take my rivet and snap it on there. So now I have the bottom die that came with these rivets, and I'm going to grab, I don't think it really matters, but I'm gonna grab my 8mm top die and see, yeah, this looks like it's a 6mm, but that's okay. I'm gonna try to put my 8mm top die in the top of this rivet press here. And then I'll put the bottom die that came with the rivets there. And the reason you want different bottom dies is because you don't want these ears here to curve because they'll break. I've done that on other ones. So we're gonna lay this so that the ears one is down along that bigger die. And then we're gonna push from the top and see what happens. All right, it pressed very easily and it looks great. Yeah, it's adorable. That's a beautiful little rivet. All right, cool. So let's use that on the bag. So I was originally planning on just using 2 rivets, but we also want to rivet the bottom down here. So I'm going to use 4 rivets. I'm going to use 2 rivets above this seam and 2 rivets below. So you can just kind of feel around, especially on the below part. If you want to use a ruler to help you measure and find the center, you can definitely do that. Remember, my strap is 1 inch wide, so I'm going to mark 1/2 inch in. I'm just doing the bottom right now. All right, that looks pretty centered. I'm gonna grab my hole punch. And when I punch through, I'm punching through the lining and everything on the back because we want to hold this in place really well. Okay, and then the only thing you have to remember with this type of rivet is that the long post has to go on the back and then the feature cap goes on the front. And then you just want to make sure you hold it together while you put it into your rivet press. And then just gently press it down. Isn't that cute? I love that. How fun. Oh, that's fun. Okay, so let's do the other one as well. See if I can keep it lined up. I have a tendency to have these things twist because they don't quite snap in place. You have to really, you might want to actually lay it in the die first and then insert the material and the post afterwards. That's so fun. So now the pattern doesn't call for it, but I actually do like to also put rivets up here because I don't want this dangling around, you know? And also, remember, I have raw edges on the back of the strap, so I want it tucked in. So I'm also going to add rivets up here. And when I add these rivets, I'm actually not gonna rivet them to this material right here. I'm only gonna rivet to hold the D-ring in place. So I'm only riveting through the strap. So let me just find a good midpoint mark. Okay, so I have a couple dots marked on those. And now when I punch a hole, I'm actually going to fold the material away just like that and punch a hole just through the strap tab. So I'm gonna do that for both of these. All right, and the fun part. I'm gonna add my post to the back of it so that way you see that feature cap on the front. And I'm just gonna put the cap in the bottom die and then insert the post over it. There we go. It's cute. I like that. I like a little double Mickey. That's adorable. So I probably could have used just the regular rivets on the bottom here, but here's the thing. Right now it is like, that's a lot of rivets. You're not gonna see this rivet really in the end. This gets covered up with a pocket. So you'll only, it's a secret rivet. It's a hidden Mickey. That's what it is. It's a hidden Mickey. Alrighty, those look so cute. I'm just gonna try to twist them so they're a little bit more straight. Oh yeah, that's fun. All right, we got the rivets in place. Now, magnetic snaps. So we're gonna grab the female magnetic snap and we're gonna attach that to the lining part of this pocket. This is a magnetic slip pocket. If you don't wanna use magnetic snaps, you don't have to, but it does hold it together really nicely. So what we wanna do is we wanna find the midpoint here. So we're going to just fold this in half. And I'm gonna use chalk to help me mark the midpoint. And then we're gonna measure 3/4 inch down and then make a tiny mark there. Now for this, you're gonna also want that piece of firmer stabilizer. And what we're gonna do is we're going to punch a hole, and this is only if you're using the rivet magnetic snaps like I am. If you're using the one with the prongs, then you're gonna follow the instructions and it's gonna walk you through that. But I am going to use the rivets. So I'm gonna punch a hole where my mark is. And then I'm also gonna punch a hole in the center of this little 1 inch by 1 inch Peltex piece. Here we go. So then the female end of the magnetic snap is going to go so it's on the right side of the lining. And push that through the hole. And then on the back, I'm going to cover that prong with the Peltex and then add the snap on the back, just like that. And then I'm going to grab the associated dies for this. So the bottom die looks like a male snap. That's going to go in the bottom. And then the top die looks kind of like a rivet die, which, I mean, it is. These are rivets. And then I can just insert this upside down, lock it in with my dies, and give it a good press. And there we go. Now we have our magnetic snap in place. We have a rivet on the back. If you want to cover this with more stabilizer, you can, but it is very smooth. You shouldn't have a problem with this tearing anything or scratching anything. I think this is looking great. Okay, so just push this to the side while we work on the other magnetic snap. So now you're going to grab C2, which is your exterior slip pocket lining, and this is pretty much just going to go like that. Buddy up with that piece. So let's find the midpoint along that top edge of our new piece. And then you're going to measure down 1 3/4 of an inch from that midpoint mark. So this starts to get a little tricky. So when this comes on, I'm going to poke a hole where it is with my stiletto. Just a teeny tiny one so I can see. There we go. And then using that, I'm just going to show you, it's going to line up with the other magnetic snap like this. You see, it's hard to visualize, but this is how it's going to go. So what I would do is just kind of use something to help you make sure it's centered. It's not like really off center. If you're using midpoint marks here, you should be fine. But now we want to install the male end of the snap on this side. So for that, I have a cap, the male magnetic snap, and then another piece of Peltex. So once again, I'm going to poke a hole where my mark is on my lining. And then I'm also going to pop a hole in the center of my Peltex. And then I'm going to take my male magnetic snap and I'm going to push that through the lining, flip it over, add the Peltex to the back, and then the cap on the back, just like that. I'm going to grab my rivet press and remove the die that looks like the male end, and I'm going to add the die that looks like the female end. And then I can just take this with the male side down, kind of lock it in place, and then press. All right, so now you should be able to take your magnetic snaps, put them together. Yep, that lines up. That looks good. Perfect. So now you're going to grab your big exterior panel you've already prepared. I know, this is getting a little complicated now. You're going to lay it right side up. And we want the side that doesn't have the zipper. So down here is the side with the zipper. We're working on the back now. So the front's good. We're working on the back. Now you're going to take your slip pocket that has the male end magnetic snap, and you're going to lay it right side down and match up those top edges. So this is pretty much the same size as the exterior piece. So lay them right sides together and clip along the top straight edge here. So now we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have those sewn together, let's press them wrong sides together. So I'm going to use an iron for this. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push the lining away, and the seam right now is behind the lining, and I'm going to press it from the right side, making sure I don't touch my vinyl with my iron. And then I'm going to fold the whole thing wrong sides together, just rolling along that seam, just like that. And then make sure everything is lined up, it's not twisted. If the lining is kind of peeking out on the side, don't worry about it, that's fine. We're just worried about this top edge right here, so get that the way you want it. And then once again, I'm going to press along that top edge. There we go. And then what I'm going to do to make sure I don't have to worry about any movement is I'm going to clip just a couple clips on the sides to hold the sides together. So now let's top stitch along this top edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now grab your exterior back panel with the lining in the top and the other snap. Now we're going to take our 2 lining panels with the snaps and snap them together, just like this. Okay, so if you have any clips, go ahead and remove those. So we have this snapped on to that back panel. Now you're gonna lift this up, this exterior here. So we're just looking at the lining panels now. Do your best to keep everything straight. This part's a little tricky. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a couple clips just to this top seam up here at the very top of my pocket so that that doesn't move around on me. And I'm just going to flip the whole unit up. And now I'm looking at this bottom edge here, and I'm going to clip along the sides. I know it seems a little finicky right now, It doesn't have to be perfect. This is a lining pocket. We just want to keep it as straight as possible. So I'm just clipping along the sides to hold it in place. Okay, and then you're supposed to draw a line that is 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of this top edge. So 3/4 of an inch, just like that. We're gonna sew right along that line. It's just easier to know where it is if we draw the line. So now let's stitch right along that 3/4 of an inch line, doing your best to hold everything together. Once you have that stitched in place, go ahead and trim the seam allowance down. There we go, perfect. So now, once again, folding this exterior up and out of the way, we're going to draw 3/4 of an inch lines along the sides. And we're only going to draw them up to 3/4 of an inch from this top edge over here where we have it pinned. So we can just fold this up. You can take your ruler and mark 3/4 of an inch from the top and draw a horizontal line. And then from there, you're going to mark 3/4 of an inch down the sides. So go ahead and do this on both sides. So now we're going to sew along these marked lines. You can't see it very well. But we're going to sew along the 3/4 of an inch line that goes horizontally up here and then also vertically along the edges. What we're doing is we're just trying to get a really structured pocket, but we don't want all this excess in the seams because we will be working with a zipper around here. So this is just going to help with that. Okay, once you have those sewn, you're going to trim the seam allowance down close to the stitching. So just like this, just up the side and then also below the horizontal stitching. Okay, so this is what you should have. It's looking pretty cool. You can take off some of the clips, and if you want, you can fold it all up to give it a good look. See? Isn't that adorable? Oh, this bag is gonna look so cool. So go ahead and put this to the side, and we'll start working on the lining panel. So now grab your other lining panel A, and you're gonna mark a 1/2 inch by 7 inch rectangle on the back. The measurements for all of this are in the pattern. And now let's flip it right side up and grab your interior zipper pocket K. And if you haven't already, go ahead and mark the midpoint on at least one of these on the top edge. Now use the midpoint on your A piece and also on the top edge of your lining piece, and match it up and measure it down 1.5 inches. And again, I'm going to use tape just to hold this material in place so I don't have to worry about it moving around. So now we can just flip this over, and from the wrong side of our lining panel, we're going to stitch along this rectangle, that 1/2 inch by 7 inch rectangle, around all 4 edges. I forgot to turn the camera on for that bit. I apologize. But just like we did before, what we want to do is we want to open up this hole. So use your seam ripper to rip along that center horizontal line, just enough to get your scissors in there. And then grab your scissors and cut along that center line until you get to the tip of the triangle. And then go off towards the corners, getting as close as you can to the stitches without cutting them. Do this for both sides. Now we're going to use an iron again to press this open. So from this side, make sure you remove any tape you have on here. And then push that pocket through the hole. And working on the back side, okay, this is going to be a little bit harder with waterproof canvas because we don't actually want to touch the back of the waterproof canvas with the iron. So this is going to be a little tricky. So what you can actually do is press it from the front, as long as you know you've rolled that seam really straight. There we go. So that looks good. So again, I'm just going to go from the back. And on this bottom part here, I can actually press from the back because I have enough material to press on. My big thing right now is I just don't want to touch the back of my waterproof canvas with the iron. All right, so that looks great. So now I'm going to grab my zipper tape and I'm going to cut it longer than it needs to be. So pretty much longer than the lining panel, just like that. And then I'm going to grab my zipper pull for the lining and add that. So this time I put the double-sided tape on the material. And I'll remove the paper from the top tape. And then I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to have my zipper, when closed, going to the left, just like before. I'm going to center this over the zipper, lining it up. And then I like to pull the zipper pull all the way to the side. That way I can kind of pick it up, move it around, make sure it's centered. There we go. Once I'm happy with that, then I'll flip this up and remove the paper from the other tape. And push that down. There we go. Perfect. So now let's go top stitch along all 4 edges of this pocket. I'm actually going to back stitch over the zipper ends right here because we are going to turn the whole bag through this in a later step. So I don't want to accidentally rip the stitching right here. So whenever you top stitch these zippers on, always make sure to check the back and that you've got the whole zipper. Sometimes if you have a skinnier zipper tape, you might not quite grab it, so you're gonna have to fix that. So as always, I have my tails long. I'm gonna pull them to the back, and then I will just triple knot and burn down the tails of the long threads. So I just trim down the zipper tape. I'm gonna grab my remaining panel and I'm gonna lay it right side down. And so the only difference between this one and the other pocket on the front is that we're not going to sew the bottom edge closed. We're going to leave that open. But we do want to clip it all together, right sides together. And now we're going to sew along the 3 edges, the side and the top, at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once again, you're going to want to do that with the panel side up, lift it out of your way, and just go along all 3 edges, leaving the bottom open, and make sure you backstitch really well at the beginning and the end because we're going to be pulling on this a little bit. This little lining zip pocket should be all good to go. You can set this to the side. Now we're going to work on the card slot. So you're going to grab your card slot, lining cut, and then also the template. And we need to mark fold lines and placement lines. So I'm going to mark fold lines just by making a little tick on the edge with my air erasing marker, just like that. So these are the fold lines. And then I'm going to mark the placement lines with my chalk marker, and I'm going to extend those across the whole panel. But for now, I'm just doing it right in the seam. Those are my placement lines. So now I'm just going to shift this up so I can mark the other side as well. And now I'm going to use a small ruler to connect the placement lines on each side and just draw straight white lines. All right, so I'm not using any sort of extra interfacing or anything like that. If you're using quilt cotton, you will. I'm just going to fold this and put them where they go. So whenever we have our fold lines, so I have these little marks on the side, we're gonna pinch on those marks on the fold lines, and we're gonna press the material wrong sides together. So pinch on those marks and then make sure the sides are lined up, and then just press right along that fold. I'm making sure my iron is not touching the back of my waterproof canvas. There we go. So then, once again, we're going to take these pinch lines and I'm just going to fold it wrong sides together, and then I will deal with the placement lines in just a moment. So again, folding it wrong sides together, pressing right where those fold marks are. And then I've got 2 more, so I've got this one here, and then I'll do the bottom one as well. Okay, so I have all my fold lines, so I'm just gonna leave the top one folded, and I'm gonna take the second fold line and I'm gonna bring it up to meet that chalk white line. It's hard to see now, but there's a chalk white line there, and that's a placement line. And so when I do that, I have like a little bump down here. I want that to become folded, so I'm just gonna put my iron right over it to flatten it out. There we go. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I have the next fold line. I'm gonna pull that up to the placement line, flatten it out, and then press it down. There we go. And then a final fold comes up to the final placement line. And once again, press it down. And now while that's really hot, I will kind of, without burning my fingers, push everything where it goes. With waterproof canvas, it's hard to keep it in place. If you're using craft fuse or something with quilt cotton, that's a lot easier. But I'm gonna try to let it cool with this ruler pressed on top of it so that it will stay in place. Okay, so I have it pretty much exactly how I want it, but now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along the top fold of each one of these. So just make sure you move it out of the way when you top stitch the next one. You're not top stitching through all of the card pockets. Okay, now grab your lining slip pocket and lay it right side up. So now on the bottom of your lining pocket, mark a line that is 1 1/4 inch up from the bottom edge. I'm using chalk. It should be something that can be erased. And then take your card slot pocket and flip it upside down and open it up just like that. And on this top edge, so if you folded it up, this is the very top edge of your card slot pocket. You're gonna mark a line on the back side that is 3/4 inch from that top short edge. Now take your card slot pocket right side down and line the raw edge of the top edge of your card slot pocket. Remember, your card slot pocket right now is like upside down. If you flipped it over, it'd be like this. It's upside down, opened up. Line up that top raw edge with that mark on the lining pocket. If you want to use clips here, you can use clips. If you want to use tape, pins, whatever you want. You want to just keep everything in place. And I'm also going to add a couple clips up further. Doesn't get twisted. And now we're going to sew along that 3/4 inch line that's on the back of the card slot pockets. So now this is neat. So now you have it all sewn together. Just fold down your card slot pockets and it should just match up with that bottom edge. Isn't that nuts? I love it. So just space them all out. If anything got twisted, space it out. It should line up with the bottom edge pretty well. How cute is that? Okay, so now I'm going to add some clips along the sides of my card slot pockets to hold it together. I don't want to move it around anymore. I think this is just an adorable way to do a little card slot pocket in a bag. Who doesn't love card slots in a bag? Okay, now let's go baste these sides and the bottom just to hold it in place at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have that basted on, let's just fold this whole long centerpiece, wrong sides together, and make a nice little rectangle. How cute! And then you can grab your iron and just iron along the top. I like that. I like that placement. That's fun. That's a fun one. Okay, and once again, I'm going to use just a few clips because I have a tendency to let things fall apart on the way to the sewing machine. So now I'm going to top stitch along all 4 edges at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, we're about wrapping up the lining. So now take your lining center piece and take your little card slot unit and just line it up on the bottom and the edges. This bag has so many pockets. Zip pockets and slip pockets and magnetic pockets and card pockets. Goodness. I mean, I love pockets. This is a lot of pockets. Okay, we can quickly baste this in place. Once that's sewn on, grab your H2 lining sides, and we're just going to add those onto the sides. So you can do this one at a time or both at the same time. Just lay them right sides together and make sure it's like this. So it's like this, okay? So I have one attached right sides together. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And you can see that where those card slot pockets are, it's starting to get very bulky, and we still have a few more stitches to make there. So you got to be careful with this. This waterproof canvas is fine because it's a little bit thinner, and I know my machine can sew through it all. But if I was using a thicker waterproof canvas, this would not be going well. So now we're going to sew along both of these edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have those sewn, flip open those flaps, and if you want, you can press it. I think I will press it. So I'm going to pull it open and just press one at a time. The nice thing again about waterproof canvas is that it does have that plasticky coating on the back. So when you press it so that the back is touching itself, it like melts together and holds itself pretty well. There we go. So that's like super flat now. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and once that's cool, now we can take this to the sewing machine and top stitch along the side flaps at an 1/8 inch seam allowance to hold the seam behind them. All right, and what's next? The bottom. So lay it out like it's going to be in the end, see? And then flip it right sides together and clip along this bottom edge, keeping it nice and straight. And now let's sew along that clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And once again, I'm going to press the seam behind the bottom panel, so the piece I just added, and I'm going to iron that to help it stick and lay really flat. Okay, now let's top stitch along this bottom edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. All right, this panel's done. You can go ahead and set it to the side. So now let's get these gussets worked out. So lay out all of your material in their assorted groups, just like this. What you want to do is take a fabric 1 gusset and then a fabric 2 gusset, and the ones that are mirroring each other. So don't make them the same. They should be mirroring one another just like this, and then flip them right sides together, okay? And make sure you know which edge is your straight edge. So this here on the left, that's my straight edge. So I'm gonna add clips to the top and the bottom and the sides, and I'm gonna leave the straight edge unclipped because I wanna remember to not sew there. So I'm gonna do this again. They are different fabrics and they are mirror images, and then flip them right sides together. And then no clipping on the straight side over here on the left. So once again, mirrors, right sides together. My straight edge is on the left, so I'm not putting a clip there. So on the 3 clipped edges on each of these, you're gonna sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and you can backstitch at the beginning and the end just a little bit if you'd like. Once these are sewn together, let's clip the corners at the very least. With a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I don't think we really need to trim the sides so much, but these corners that have the stitching next to them, let's trim those. Not too close to the stitches because it can rip and it's a whole thing, so close to it, but not too close. Isn't that frustrating? I know that's frustrating. I'm sorry. And now we're going to take these and we're going to flip them right sides out, nice and gentle. This is where your turning tool might come in really handy. Just poke out those corners. There we go. And once you have it all turned out, use your fingers to kind of roll along those seams. Get it nice and flat, and then let's press it with an iron to get these as flat as possible. Okay, so what I actually do is I press it really well from the front and the back, and then I'm just gonna slide it underneath my pressing mat while I do the rest of them because I want it to cool and be really flat. So I'm gonna do this for all 4 of these accordion gussets. All right, so I'm gonna lift up my pressing mat, and there are all my little super flat gussets. All right, let's put those to the side. So grab both of your lining panels and let's do some prep work on here. So we're gonna mark 1 inch above this bottom notch, just right in the seam allowance, and do this on the left and right of both of your lining panels. So now you're gonna take a couple of your gussets, and what we wanna do is we want the lining sides to come together, and we want the raw straight edge to go against the raw edge of the lining. And we're gonna match up the bottom edge with that 1 inch mark. So I'm just gonna kind of roughly lay it out like that. So this one would go over here. So your exterior fabric should be facing up. And let's do the right sides as well. There we go. Isn't that cool? That's gonna look good. Okay, so now let's actually clip them in place. Let's do the raw edges together. I'm gonna grab some clips to make sure it stays together. And I'm gonna do this for all 4 gussets. I just suggest that you lay them out first before you start clipping them together to make sure everything's okay. I know on my original bag, I did have to remake a couple gussets because I didn't put them together correctly. All right, once you have these clipped in place, let's just sew along the clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, you can go ahead and set these to the side. So if you're using zipper tape, go ahead and cut it to 32 inches long, and I'm gonna do a double zipper pull on here. So I'm gonna insert 1 zipper pull on one end, going towards the center, and another zipper pull on the other end, going towards the center. They need to be going towards each other. So let's fold our zipper tape in half and find the midpoints. And then I'm gonna mark the midpoints with this vinyl pen, but right in the seam. Now grab your 2 lining panels and make sure you have the midpoint marked on the top of both of them. So I'm going to do this one here. Once you have those marked, grab your exterior panel and make sure you have the midpoints marked on the top edge of both of those as well. I don't have it on this side, so I'm going to do that. You know what, while I'm here, I don't have this side right here basted down, and it is kind of bumping around on me, so I'm going to just baste at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance right here where this slip pocket connects. So now we're going to work with the lining panel that has the card slot pockets. You can put the rest of the panels to the side. So grab your lining panel and your zipper, and you want to match up the midpoint on your zipper tape with the top midpoint of your lining panel and lay them right sides together. So you might want to transfer that midpoint to the back side of your zipper. So now starting with those midpoints, clip them right sides together and then go around the edge. And you might find it easiest to take both zipper pulls and pull them pretty close to the end. If you want, you can sew over the edge of your zipper tape just to make sure that they don't come flying off, but I just get them about 1 inch away. And I'm just going to go around clipping the zipper tape to this lining panel all the way around. Make sure you don't have it too loose. It has a nice tight fit, but you don't have anything rippling or creasing on itself. Okay, so now we're going to baste this in place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to start from the center and go down one side all the way to the end, and then start in the center and go down the other side all the way to the end, and that should help keep the zipper tape in a good position without shifting around too much. Once you have this basted in place, grab your exterior panel, and we want the side with the front zipper. And I like to move my zipper in the middle just to make sure I don't sew over it. And we're going to lay that right side down against the right side of our lining, sandwiching that zipper in between. So before we do that, come over here and mark where the end of this little corner is on your zipper tape. So I just lift it up and just mark here because we want everything to line up with the way it is now. So I'm just marking where the bottom edge of that lining panel is on both sides of the zipper tape. And now take your exterior and lay it right side down over that lining, sandwiching the zipper in place. Line up the midpoint marks on the top first, clip those together, and then go down to the edges and clip the bottom boxed edges together on their corners. Do this for both sides. And then we can go along the straight edges first, clipping everything together, making sure that zipper's in between everything. I know it gets a little tricky around the curves. That's why I like to do the straight parts first, and then I do the curves last. I'm just gonna kind of mush it in there, trying to make sure nothing pleats or ripples, anything like that. If you have any trouble, you can always grab some scissors and cut little snips along the lining panel side with the zipper tape, and that will help it spread out a little bit more. So I've done one side. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that with the left side. All right, once you have it all clipped the way you like it, let's take it to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge entirely at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So the pattern suggests trimming the seam allowance down a little bit to reduce the bulk. You can definitely do that. I'll trim around the corners a little bit where my seam allowance gets a little bit bigger, but you also don't really want to trim the zipper tape. So you have to be a little careful with this. So around these corners as well, these little curved corners, I'm gonna cut little slits to help it expand as I turn it out to get a smoother finish. But I'm not cutting too close to the stitching because we don't want to put too much pressure on that, and then what happens is the stitches stay together but the fabric splits. So now we're going to flip this out. This one section we've done, we're going to flip it out right side out. So now just check your curves, and they're looking pretty good actually. except for the fact that I installed my zipper upside down. Oh, fun time. So as you can see, my zipper is inside out. I was not supposed to attach it right sides together with the lining. So I get the seam ripper out and I get to redo this. All right, that took a while, but we got it fixed, I think. Let's flip it out and make sure it looks right. That happens sometimes. That's part of the reason too why I don't really like to clip my seams too much. Because if I had made the seams really, really small, then I wouldn't have been able to go back and redo that. All right, so this is looking good. Yes, zipper on the outside where it's supposed to be. Perfect. Okay, so now let's just go around and make sure the edge is pulled out. And when you have this gusset here, it wants to flip out. You don't want it to do that. You want it to go back, just like that. Because when we top stitch it, we want to top stitch the gusset back. So I'm going around the whole thing, just pulling it out. You can press this with an iron if you'd like. You really don't need to though. So now using my zipper foot, I'm going to go around and top stitch around the entire outer edge of my exterior fabric at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And once again, you need to make sure that this doesn't come out like that. The gusset needs to be folded in. So if it's easier for you, grab some tape, get it nice and tight and flat in here, and tape it down. And that way, it's just not something you have to worry about too much. All right, now let's go top stitch this. Okay, so top stitching around that's not that bad, but it is difficult around these curves. So if you're not the best top stitcher, like mine's still pretty wonky, I suggest using a thread color that's the same color as your material. So now we're just gonna do that exact same thing for the other side. So let's go ahead and open up this zipper. Again, make sure you don't let the zipper pulls fall off the end or anything. I have clips on the end of mine, but it's best if you stitch there. So now let's grab the lining panel with the zipper pocket in it and lay it right side up. Take your unit, and we're interested in the zipper side that doesn't have anything attached. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that side and lay your zipper right side up and your lining right side up. Let's do it correct this time. Match up the midpoint marks first. You know this gets a little cumbersome with all this down here. And then keeping the zipper tape right side up, move it around until you find that mark that you made when we were marking the edges, and line that up with the bottom boxed edge of your lining panel, just like that. And then clip the zipper tape to the right side of your lining all the way up and around the curve. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. Just make sure you don't get your zipper tape all twisted. So keep it till it's right side up. Find that mark. Mine is on the back side of my zipper tape. Line it up with that boxed edge on the side of your lining and clip so that the lining and the zipper tape are both right side up. And just go all the way up around the curve. All right, now that we have this zipper clipped in place, I'm gonna base stitch around the entire lining panel at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so here's how we have it. We have the lining facing right side up and the zipper facing right side up. We have the front panel we already did, and we want to kind of mush that out of the way while we bring the other front panel up that's not attached to anything and lay that right sides together with the zipper. So you've got the inside kind of mushed in. You can just push that down actually. There you go. So we can get the other panel that we're already done with out of the way. And we just want to bring these two right sides together. Line up at the midpoint first, and then go down to the sides here and make sure you match up the boxed corners. And then just clip your way up along the straight side until you get to the curve at the top. All right. right, once you have it all clipped together, let's sew along this clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm gonna sew it with the exterior wrong side up. Alright, that one was definitely a little tricky, but we got around it, so I'm just going to clip into the curves again so they can spread out a little bit easier. And I'm clipping through all of the layers when I do this. Oh, I have one little pleat there. Oh well. It adds character. Okay, now let's turn this so that it's right side out. So I have a little pleat right here by Jafar's face, so I'm actually going to fix that. I'm going to flip it back out and try to make sure I remember where that is. Right there. See if I can find it on the back. So it's right here where all these layers are. So I'm going to just unpick where that pleat is, and I'm going to fix it. Okay, so I got it a little bit unclipped, but I'm not sure I'm going to really be able to fix it because my material is starting to stretch a little bit now. So I'm just going to try to stitch over the one spot and see if it fixes it. All right, let's flip it out and see if that works. There's still the tiniest pleat there, and that's just because my material is starting to stretch because I'm messing with it too much, but I'm okay with it. All right, so now we need to get this set up to top stitch it. So just like we did on the other side, let's fold these gussets back and tape them down. All right, so I've got those taped in place. So now flip it over, nice and flat. You can iron this if you want, but I don't really feel like it needs it. I'm actually gonna flip my zipper up because that's gonna make it easier to top stitch. And now we're just gonna go around the whole edge top stitching, and it is tricky top stitching around these corners because now we have these tabs in the way. Just go slow and do your best. Okay, once you have it all top stitched, we're gonna turn everything wrong side out again. Mostly what we're interested in right now is getting these bottom edges of the lining right sides together. So whatever you have to do to get it to be easy to do that. Now make sure your lining zipper pocket, so this one right here, no, this one up here, make sure that zipper is open, okay? So if you reach in, you put your hand through it. There you go. Okay. And be careful with your zipper ends. They will want to fly off, so make sure you keep those away from the edges. And now take the bottom here of your lining panels and pull them up right sides together and clip along that bottom edge. Now sew along that bottom edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So now you're going to turn this whole bag out to the right side through this lining zipper pocket. So just reach all the way in and just be gentle. Make sure you don't lose your zipper pulls. That's the big thing here. No zipper pull loss, and try not to lose your Peltex on the bottom. That's already coming undone for me. Alrighty, here we go. Go ahead and pull all that tape off if you used it like I did. So reach in and make sure you got all of your edges turned out really nicely. We're going to give this a quick press with the iron just to get it looking a little nicer. All right, there we go. I'm telling you, this is looking great. So now what we want to do is pull up the zipper a little bit, and we want our linings facing out. So we're going to pull up the zipper a little bit like this. So pull down the zipper tape and pull up the zipper. Just like that. Linings out. We still have the slip pocket out so we don't forget about it. Alright, so now what we're going to do is box these bottoms. And we're going to box the zipper tape into the bottoms. So get everything lined up and centered. And then just line up this bottom seam of your lining with the center of your zipper tape. And pull together. Grab some clips to hold this in place. do this for the other side as well. Just make sure you don't lose your exterior or anything like that. You need all of the layers to come together and line up nice and neat. All right, now let's go sew along both of these clipped edges at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn, go ahead and trim this down so that it's about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So just pretty much trim it in half and trim off that extra zipper. So to bind these edges, what I do is I just have 2 pieces of my waterproof canvas, and they're 1 inch by 6 inches. And I just wrap it around the edge. That's it. I don't double fold it, nothing like that. I'm just wrapping it around the edge. And 6 inches is definitely too long, but I wrap it around the edge, and then I use some clips to hold it in place. So I'm gonna do this for both sides. This is just a really easy way to hide that raw seam. So now I'm gonna take these to the sewing machine, and I'm just gonna sew pretty much down the middle, more towards the side, like a 1/4 inch away from the side, but I'm just sewing this in place to hold it in place. Once you have it in there, just make sure you check both sides, that both sides got caught. And then you can just use the edge as a guide and trim down the excess of the binding. Doesn't have to look perfect, it's just the bottom of the bag. All right, next up, let's close this lining pocket. So I'm just gonna pull on it, and I'm pretty much just gonna fold it all down. Anywhere between a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, whatever is easiest. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can fold this and iron this if you'd like, or if you're just not that picky, just fold it down, making sure all the raw edges are tucked inside, and add some clips. Call it a day. Something I've been really enjoying adding are these little message tags. This one says, "I took forever to make," and it did, because I kept making mistakes. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna slide that into the fold before I top stitch it so you can see it. And that's like a fun little message so that whenever somebody's using it, if they clean out the bottom, they see that. All right, let's top stitch along the bottom of this edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now that that's closed, let's just tuck it in there and get it as flat as you can. All right, all the way in there, perfect. Now we gotta finish up these gussets. So all you have to do with the gussets is just push down the zipper, or you can open it, however it's easiest. But you want to take these exterior pieces of fabric and pull them right sides together and line them up right along the edges and clip in place. You know, these gussets are a pretty easy last step. So do this for both sides. Like I said, it might be easier for you to unzip your zipper, push in together with the lining facing outside and the exterior fabrics right sides together. Okay, so now we're just gonna sew along both of these edges at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, and just to clean it up a little bit, I'm gonna burn the ends. This bag. But that is just gonna make sure we don't have any of those little threads peeking through. All right, now let's flip the whole thing right side out and see if we made any giant mistakes. So poking out all the corners, it's looking pretty good. Make sure we turn out the top. If you need to give it another press, go ahead and give it another press. Let's zip it up. Oh yeah, that is looking so cute. And you know what? I totally forgot to put my bag tag on here, didn't I? What is going on today? So I'm gonna have to figure out a way. I'm gonna probably have to hand stitch on a bag tag because I did forget to put a bag tag on today. But I do have my strap. This is a pre-made strap, so I am done with that. I don't have to worry about making a strap now. So, like I said, you might want to give it another really good press. But this bag is so adorable. All right, we encountered some issues, some mistakes, but we did it. Oh my gosh, look how beautiful this bag is. This fabric, right? I love villains. If you follow me on social media, you know I'm a big fan of villains. I'm just saying, there's a story behind each one of them. And I absolutely adore this bag. I think this would be a fantastic, like, Disney bag. Remember when they used to have, like, the villains after dark or something like that? There used to be like an after hours event down at Disney World, and it was like a villains event. This would be fun to wear to that. So this bag came together so nice. Like I said, it's kind of like a mix between a crossbody bag and a wallet, so you just kind of have to think about it that way. Just remember that there are quite a few steps, but take your time. They're all very simple steps. The hardest part is definitely this curve right here, which is why I would say it's probably not the most beginner-friendly bag. If you have a little bit of experience with curves already, I think you're gonna be fine. But if you haven't done curves yet, you might wanna find an easier pattern that addresses curves just a little bit so you get a little more comfortable with it. But definitely add this to your list because it is just a really cool bag. So once again, thank you so much to Hold It Right There Patterns for allowing me to use this pattern in my tutorial today. I absolutely adore it. I want to make one of these bags for all of my friends who are traveling. I know a lot of you guys might be traveling to Orlando in November of this year, maybe for a So Magical Expo. This would be a great, great bag to take with you to that. So I hope you love making this bag as much as I do. Have a great rest of your day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.